Democrats and allies cannot rebut negative feelings about the economy with positive facts about the economy. So what is it that we should be doing?
That was Lauren Goldstein, a psychologist and public opinion research expert, talking about one of the biggest challenges that Joe Biden and the Democrats face in the 2024 election as we try to prevent an extinction-level event for American democracy in the form of Donald Trump returning to office. It's the fact that voters think the economy is terrible, and the economy continues to be their top issue of concern, as it has been in every recent presidential election. What's especially galling for Democrats is that under President Biden, people mostly personally think that they're doing well financially. The American economy has had the lowest unemployment in 50 years, the greatest single year of job creation ever, and has done much better on inflation and economic growth than all the other major economies in the world. The thing is, we can talk about that until we're blue in the face, but it doesn't seem to be making the map any bluer. How do we win on this? Lauren and I got right into that as I interviewed her on my podcast, and we started in with her explaining a really critical point for understanding what's going on. So why is it important to understand the difference between vibes and trends?
I think ultimately it's so that we make sure that political communicators and voters are having the same conversation, because we ultimately have to communicate with people about both, about the trends and the vibes, but they're different and they require a different communication strategy. When it comes to trends, many people are still struggling a lot. Costs, inflation, prices, crisis of affordable housing, student loan debt that they're struggling to repay, high cost of childcare, high cost of healthcare. There's a quote that I think about all the time that a voter expressed to me a few months ago. She said, "Lie to me and tell me we're not in a depression. Okay, maybe that's true, but everyone's depressed." And that really encapsulates the challenge that we're up against here.
I also think a little bit about the finding that what people really care about is not their absolute level of income, but the comparison to their neighbors. How are they doing relative to the people around them? So what jumps out to you when you see people's personal financial evaluations like this?
It's a huge question. It's not so much your absolute economic prosperity so much as it is comparisons, social comparisons, financial comparisons to your peers, your neighbors. That's definitely an example of how vibes can matter profoundly.
The response of, actually, the economy is going great. It could backfire. It could make people whose evaluation of their personal situation is negative feel even worse.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a huge risk. I think a lot of people are thinking about the point of comparison as the past. I can't keep up with what my parents' generation was capable of doing, and they feel like it's slipping away.
I'll tell you the finding that really smacked me in the face in your research. People do not care about job opportunities in their area. They do not care about jobs. Job growth is the Biden administration's biggest economic achievement. It's the number one thing Democrats have as a talking point. Should they stop talking about it?
I'm really glad you asked that. No, there were aspects of the economy that they seized on, and job opportunities where you live wasn't one of them. It's not at all that we have to cede ground on our accomplishments or not talk about the economy. We just need to make sure that we're meeting people where they are. And when it comes to economic pain points, they're much more concerned about costs. We can't just say we're creating jobs and expect people to fundamentally shift their perception of their own economic security as a result. Most voters express generally the sentiment that they feel like the economy is rigged. Where we have a big divide politically is what they think is rigged and who is benefiting. So for left-leaning voters, they are diagnosing systemic wealth inequality to be the big thing that we are struggling with. Wealth is concentrated at the very top for millionaires, billionaires, and corporations. So for these voters, just because things are getting better doesn't mean that they perceive that the system is getting any fairer. Right-leaning voters are diagnosing a really different systemic problem. 65% of Republicans said funding overseas wars instead of domestic priorities, and 57% of them said too many people are getting government handouts. And when I asked them, who in our society do you think is making the most use of government services these days? 82% said, I'm quoting, illegal immigrants. So their perception is that the government is unfairly dispersing their tax dollars of hardworking Americans to beneficiaries that didn't earn it. And I will note Trump and his allies are exploiting those beliefs for their own electoral gain at every possible opportunity.
So what does this work say about how to talk to them, specifically about this issue of who's doing the rigging in the economy?
It's the central question. The first thing I'll say, again, Democrats and allies cannot rebut negative feelings about the economy with positive facts about the economy. And it can be very frustrating when you feel like the facts are on your side. It can be very tempting to just reach for them as proof that your argument is the better one. That's not good communication. That is not how we persuade people. It's just not going to be effective, especially in a fractured media environment where people feel like facts are up for grabs. So, what is it that we should be doing? I think, number one, Democrats have to be making the argument that Biden is tackling those systemic problems that they identify and working to make the economy fairer for everyone. Things like instituting a minimum 15% tax on corporations that have gotten away with paying little or no federal income tax, capping insulin at $35 a month for seniors because no one in America should go bankrupt over medical bills. Biden administration is trying very hard to extend that to all people, not just seniors, not just people on Medicare. But those are the types of arguments filtered through that lens of tackling inequality and holding the ultra wealthy and corporations responsible for paying their fair share that I think is essential to trying to speak to that underlying perception of what's rigged about the economy. Biden has to be positioned as the person that is tackling that problem successfully and needs 4 more years to finish the job. The other piece of this is that we have to overcome that xenophobia and racism that pollutes the immigration conversation. To your point, it has been there for decades. It is the oldest playbook that they have.
Sometimes Democrats fall into the trap of trying to engage directly with bad faith arguments about things like race and immigration, rather than taking the less emotionally satisfying but far more effective road of using the kind of framing that you just did around, hey, black or white, newcomer or sixth generation American, all of us have an interest in getting ahead and seeing our children get ahead. That kind of economic framing, far more effective. I just had to comment on your statement in your report. Accusing voters of racism and xenophobia is a bad strategy. That was delightfully prim of you. Would you like to say more?
Sometimes the intended audience of the dog whistle is us. It's progressives. They are deliberately trying to trigger us so that we will be provoked and unleash all of this outrage and all of these accusations about racism in order to spin up a conversation. And we really want to avoid playing into their hands that way. So what we want to do instead is narrate why certain people in power, certain elected officials or wannabe elected officials, want to divide us in order to distract us from their unwillingness to address real problems like wealth inequality and are unwilling to invest in solutions that would make our communities a lot more prosperous.
Let's boil down everything we've been saying thus far. What should Democrats stop doing, keep doing, and start doing?
It's a great question. What should we stop doing? I would say stop fixating on macroeconomic trends and instead start expressing all of those pain points through an optimistic lens that offers solutions and is value-centered. In terms of what we should keep doing, a lot of people are doing this well, asserting shared values, making clear that we get it by sort of joining with them and endorsing that vision and diagnosing the same problems. And what should we start doing? Again, we all need to get on the same page and aspire to those really excellent elements of messaging and make sure that we are all doing it. It's going to be that much more alienating to be told, actually, it's going better than you think it is. What we really need to do is speak to the pain points, again, all through the lens of asserting shared values, and then positioning ourselves as the people that are putting forward the best solutions, that are speaking to those underlying predispositions effectively and persuasively. Positioning ourselves as people who are not up here talking about solutions for you down there, but as people that are in this with you, who embrace your vision and are working to make your life better by taking on the same systemic problems that you are diagnosing to us.